Greetings, everyone, and welcome to the Cinema Condition, a podcast devoted to analyzing films and what makes a movie a movie. I'm your host, Raul Alejandro Mendoza, a filmmaker, podcaster, and cinema lover. Today, I'm joined by AK Al Mumen. They are a lover of cinema as myself here, a great friend of mine, a podcast producer, and he does a lot of great stuff. And today they have selected Abbas Kiarostami's The Wind Will Carry Us. Hey, AK, how are you doing today?
Pretty good, pretty good. It's nice being back on here. I remember the last time we were on here talking about Tangerine, so this
Yeah,
is fire to be back on.
yeah, man. And at the time that we're recording this, we just did our review of Tangerine over at the Nerdcore, by the way.
Oh,
Yeah,
wow. Okay.
yeah. We were
Love
doing a
it.
little bit of a Pride Month theme over at the Nerdcore too, because we were doing that and a Wes Anderson month at the same time. So we are like, hey, for our extra reviews for the week, we decided to do what's it called? One of them was Tangerine.
That's
Yeah,
dope. That's
yeah.
dope. I
Brad
love
loved it.
that movie. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's amazing. I was recently talking about it with some coworkers,
yeah,
and it is just still such an innovative movie. I love it.
yeah. Brad loves it, man. He was so entertained by that movie. Um, but how are you doing, AK?
Pretty good. Pretty good. Work about to get married at the end of the year. So a lot of running around, trying to plan the wedding, the honeymoon, all the things in between. Thankfully, me and my fiance have a large support system that's carrying a lot of this for us. So really, it's just admin stuff and seeing what's up and like making decisions on things is like kind of where we're at. But we're 6 months out. So hopefully it goes. I just want to go on my honeymoon, to be honest.
Yeah. Yeah, it's been a while since we've seen AK on the show. Last time he was here for the season finale of the show, actually, when we did
Oh.
our episode on the Last Temptation of Christ.
Oh yeah, that's also true.
Yeah,
I
which
remember the last temptation of
it was a
Christ.
great
That was an
episode.
interesting conversation.
Yeah, it really was. And yeah, man, I'm happy for you that you're getting married, and I know that you were getting married already, but yeah, I know that the planning could be just hell, dude. I know. So you're just like, I bet you're just waiting for this to all just happen already. You're like, dude, like forget
Facts.
all this planning. I just want to get married and that's it.
Facts. Someone told me recently it was basically like having a full-time second job. I was like, I'm not. Who's paying me? I'm paying everything. What is happening? What type of job is this?
This isn't a job, man. I'm getting paid. No one's paying me, man. I'm paying everything. Oh
Facts.
God. Oh God. But hey, man, I'm glad to see you again.
Me
Last time I
too.
saw AK in person, we were at a friend's party. So
Yeah, their graduation party. That
yeah,
was a lot of fun.
yeah.
That was
So
a
we
lot
got
of
to
fun.
see each other. But
Hmm.
yeah, we're both so busy, but I'm glad that AK was able to stop by here because
Always.
I really like this. I really like my episodes with you, man. They're always
Yeah.
so good and so innovative and very what's it called very insightful episodes. And I think
I
today we're
appreciate
gonna
you.
have ourselves a great one because we're talking about a film from none other than the master himself, man. One of if not the greatest filmmakers of all time. I mean,
Facts.
yeah.
Facts. Truly.
Yeah, but I've been around here, man. I've working a lot of podcasts and all these things that I usually do. I'm just so all over the
You're
place.
always so busy, Ro. You're always so dang busy. It's like where can we catch you? We need the pocket where we could get some
Yeah,
Raul in our lives. Like I feel like you're everywhere all at once and still a huge fan of this pod, fan of the nerdcore, everything y'all do over there, the community y'all have developed over there, the passion y'all have for everything. Your wrestling streams. I tell my roommate about them all the time because he's
yeah,
also a wrestling fan.
yeah,
And I'm like, yeah, so y'all are killing it. Love what y'all are doing. It's pretty dope.
yeah, man. I thank you so much. AK was like, "Well, is it possible we can probably do it on Sunday?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I got the Forbidden Door watch along I gotta do on Sunday, so I can't do that."
Facts.
So
Facts.
we're doing this today, but yeah, I'm just too busy. But I'm glad that at least we get to see each other today, man. We get to do this
Hmm.
episode. But
True. True.
yes, AK picked "The Wind Will Carry Us" from Abbas Kiarostami. So we have never discussed Abbas Kiarostami in this podcast. So I went ahead and I wrote my introduction here. So I'm gonna go ahead and get to reading that.
Let's
And
get it.
yep, Abbas Kiarostami was born on June 22nd, 1940, in Tehran. Kiarostami's first artistic venture and love was painting. He continued this love of painting into his late teens. He attended the University of Tehran School of Fine Arts, where he studied painting and graphic design. While working as a painter, designer, and illustrator, Abbas Kiarostami managed to work within the advertising industry during the 1960s, where he designed posters and commercials. During the early 60s, he created more than 150 commercials for Iranian TV, and in the late 60s, he created film credits for Iranian films. In the 1970s, the Iranian New Wave began, and Kiarostami started the filmmaking department at the Institute for Intellectual Development of Children. His first films included the shorts The Bread and Alley and Break Time. Kiarostami would then start to explore an individualistic approach to filmmaking, beginning with his films The Experience and The Traveler. These films began to expand on his fascination with physical and spiritual journeys. Abbas Kiarostami gained recognition outside of Iran with his 1987 film "Where Is the Friend's House?" And if I would like to make a little plug in there, I have done a review of "Where Is the Friend's House" on this channel because I went ahead and I covered all of the Cocker trilogy on that set from Criterion. So, wink, wink, you guys should probably go check that out.
Uh,
His international acclaim came with the success of the other two films in the Cocker trilogy, And Life Goes On and Through the Olive Trees. The films are closely related to the 1990, I'm probably going to pronounce that wrong, but I'll try my best here, Manjil Rubar earthquake. In 1990, he released Close Up, which blurred the lines between narrative and documentary as it dealt with the real life case of a man who impersonated director Mohsen Maklabaf. The film gained support and recognition from directors like Martin Scorsese, Quentin Tarantino, Jean-Luc Godard, Naomi Moretti, and Werner Herzog. Kiarostami won the Palme d'Or for his 1997 film Taste of Cherry, which I also have a review of for on the channel. In 1999, he released The Wind Will Carry Us, which won numerous awards. In 2001, Kiarostami and his assistant, Sifula Samadian, I don't know how to pronounce it. I'm so bad, y'all. I'm sorry. Traveled to Uganda on request by the UN's International Fund for Agricultural Development and shot his documentary ABC Africa. His next film, 10, abandoned all screenwriting conventions and marked his first film shot digitally. In 2003, he directed the film 5, which features no dialogue or characterization. In 2008, he directed the film Shireen, which featured notable Iranian actresses and the French actress Juliette Binoche. In 2010 marked the first time that Kiarostami worked outside of Iran with his film Certified Copy. The film competed for the Palme d'Or and reunited him with Juliette Binoche. Juliette Binoche won the Best Actress award for the film at the Cannes Film Festival. His next film, Like Someone in Love, was shot in Japan and was praised by critics. Abbas Kiarostami passed on July 4th, 2016, and his final film, 24 Frames, was released the next year.
Rest in peace.
Rest in peace. Whenever I talk about Abbas, I always remember that I believe it was that week that he passed. I think they did something at the Film at Lincoln Center, and Martin Scorsese did a beautiful introduction for the program. They were gonna screen the films, and he had so much like beautiful words to say about Kiarostami, and really regarded him as one of the most prolific voices in the space. And yeah, you can just tell how moved that man was by Kiarostami's work. And yeah, I was reading that there's like a really big confusion as to how exactly Kiarostami died. There's a lot of rumors about like the malpractice by the doctors, and like there's investigations and stuff. And did he or did he not have a fight with a gastrointestinal cancer? It's all a big thing, but Yeah, he was an incredible filmmaker, and he was definitely one of if not the greatest out there. He truly
Sure,
is. He truly is.
sure.
I actually learned about Kiarostami through AK. He recommended me Close Up, and fell in love with that man ever since.
Hmm. Close Up, considered by a lot of people to possibly be his magnus opus. I find that a very narrow definition of who he is as a person, as a director, as an auteur, as an artist, and not to kind of mythologize a very human figure in himself. But I think he embodied a lot of really special things about humans and what makes us very similar and also different. And I think that equality of differences is a beautiful thing, and I think that one of the biggest things that he brought to the table is his evolution, his transformations through cinema. I mean, even as you're reading his biography, his history, it is very obvious the motions he went through as he participated in the Iranian cinema wave, in the as he transitioned into this period of trying to meld nature with fiction in the 90s, and then transforming into those really intimate, anti-scripted motion pictures that he created later on in his career and evolved even further and further. Um, he's a very poetic figure
Yeah,
for me personally, but also so incredibly human, which I think is something that's very missed about poetry. Poetry is flawed, is human in nature, and it isn't as we like to connotate it, which is this idea of like a perfect encapsulation of a moment. It is not. It is an interpretation of a moment that we can never capture. And I think Abbas pursued a lot of that in his career, at least from my personal view and why I've enjoyed his movies.
yeah,
Um, yeah, so I've always been a huge fan. I think Iranian cinema was a great influence, and a shout out to Martin Scorsese, because it is very missed and very surprising him coming out of the American Exceptional Film School of Film, in which it is this idea of presenting the real America and how special it is, for him to be such a champion for international cinema.
oh yeah,
He has talked about third cinema, Japanese cinema, Middle Eastern cinema, and he has been a huge advocate for a lot of those movies. And I think it gets forgotten in who Martin Scorsese is and what he represents for American cinema. And
yeah,
so, shout out to the man. Shout out.
yeah. Shout out to Cinema Grandpa, man. That guy is just great.
That's
And I know
so true.
on the recent release from Criterion, the World Cinema Project #4, I believe he includes a film from Iran that was pretty much presumably lost at this point. They thought that that movie was gone, that there was
Hmm.
no way that they were gonna pull that out, and the man ordered that restoration, and that thing's back. I mean, that it's crazy. He's a champion of international cinema. He wants to make
Fact.
sure that all these things get presented here, and I'm sure that if you would sit with the man and he says, "Hey, what caused you to like have this big interest in Iranian cinema?" It would probably be this man that we're talking about today.
Hmm. That is 100% true.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But yeah, Abbas is just he's an incredible figure to me. He's somebody who I hold in regard to Akira Kurosawa, and I think that he's a filmmaker that he's very poetic. He's somebody who his lens of life is it's very poetic as well, but it's just very humanistic in the way that he like views our relationships, and he's somebody who to me just really does encapsulate everything that has to do with life. And he's one of those filmmakers that I always say that uses the frame to his complete advantage. There's
fact.
nothing that's in the frame that is not being used. Like it has something to do with also what's out of the frame, and that's probably going to be a big conversation today. It's like
Hmm.
what's not in the frame is also as important. So, he's just an incredible figure, and like every day I thank you, man, because you introduced me to him. But my favorite film from him is Taste of Cherry. That movie always just
It's so curious.
it rocks me, man. It just
Hmm.
it like I said in my review, I said it's so depressing, but it's also so tender at the time because it reminds you of like what is so beautiful about life. What are those little things about life that are worth waking up in the morning and being thankful for, and how it's just It's such a complex thing. This thing we call life is so complex.
Mm-hmm. There's this film theory that human tragedy is in the small moments. That humans can really overcome big, massive tragedies and kind of overcome it because it is one thing that they're overcoming. But the truth of human tragedy is the small tragedies we suffer on like a daily basis,
Hmm.
and those can can pile up. And when you put that imagery in a film, something that you can watch in a 2 hour and have to process it as it is, as it's being given to you, it is at one very depressing, but at the other relatable in a sense of like connection.
Yeah.
And I think it's very apropos that your podcast name references the Japanese film A Human Condition.
Yeah.
And I think that Abbas Kiarostami, in a lot of his movies, encapsulates a more daily level, a more subconscious, more subdued level of the human condition, that is also just as incredible.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah. So, but what's called AK selected "The Wind Will Carry Us," and I wrote a small little introduction because one of the biggest difficulties about this film, y'all, is not where to find it. Actually, where to watch it. It's the fact that there's little to no production history on this film written down. Unless you want to shell out $30 for the Cohen Media collection Blu-ray of this. And I don't know about y'all, but I wasn't in the position to shell out $30 for that thing right now.
Yeah, a
And
side note, international cinema, while I do appreciate what Criterion, Cohen, and Janus have done for international cinema and its restoration, um, for cinema that has been created as a method for people who do not have the budgets of Hollywood and Europe to create these small cinematic flares that carry a deeper flavor to them, and more nuance to them. It is kind of a shame that they've been trapped in this capitalist prison of
Yup.
like, oh, access to information and history about them. It's kind of like how research documents are locked behind like paywalls
Yeah.
constantly. It's like you cannot speak about the history of cinema without international cinema, and specifically the new waves of cinema that happen around the world, whether it's African, South American, or Middle Eastern, or even the Japanese, or Asian in general. And so it's a bummer that sometimes it is not provided for the educational purposes that it should be provided for.
Yup. Yup. And that's one of my biggest complaints because that's how we end up with this small introduction that I wrote here for y'all. The title references a poem written by Iranian poet Faru Farrokhzad. The film was nominated for the Golden Lion at the 56th Venice International Film Festival, and it won the Silver Lion along with the. I'm not. I always say Fipresci, but I know it's not that. It's the
Oh,
International Critics Association, y'all. But it
yeah.
has a really long name in French.
Yep.
Prize and the Cinema Avenir Award. There's a strong presence of moments in the film where there are off-frame voices. Abbas Kiarostami took inspiration from the architecture of the locations that he scouted and the space of the dimensions. If we are only looking for one dimension with the use of off-screen voices, we are reminded about the other dimensions and its images that do not show on the frame. And I got that from the little excerpt from Cohen's YouTube channel of their bonus features, which once again, it would be really nice if we could have access to this information instead of having to pay $30 for the
Facts.
Blu-ray. Um,
Yeah.
but I would also say Janice has a 4K digital restoration of this movie completely finished, and it has not been put out on another Blu-ray other than that last scan that's on the Cohen one. So I would really hope that one day it gets put on a bigger scale because, yeah, I need access to some of this info because it was really hard to look for this info, man. Unless you found a bunch of essays on JSTOR, and I don't have access to JSTOR no more.
Yeah, it's kind of it's a information light movie about its production. There were a lot of rumors going around that well, I think they've been confirmed. I'm actually not 100% sure, But a majority of the extras and the secondary cast in the movie are not actually actors, and they actually do come from those villages. I don't know if this has been confirmed or not, but there's a lot of mythology around the movie and how authentic it comes across.
Yeah.
And so it's one of those like movie mysteries that only like a handful of movie nerds
Yeah.
really care about.
Yeah.
Uh, but yeah, but it's one of those situations.
But about yeah, AK, what did you think? I'm sorry, not what did you think? Why did you pick the wind will carry us?
So I have been aware of Abbas Korsumi for a majority of my life. I of course have seen his biggest movies and have a little bit dabbled in trying to find out some of his older stuff. His newer things, the stuff that he's done post the 2000s, are much easier to find. I think my first movie that I watched of him was Certified Copy. Uh,
Classic.
yeah, right. It was in my teen years where I was really obsessed with the French New Wave and European cinema in general, and to find this like Middle Eastern director making films with some of the biggest actors in cinematography and people working that have come out of the European cinema and the European kind of like analog, like a kind of like this ladder of success for European cinema was really fascinating to me. And but when you look up a bus course through me, Certified Copy isn't one of the first movies that pop up.
No.
It is Close Up. It is Close Up and Taste of Cherries. So I ended up watching those movies, and I mean, you know how much in college I advocated for Close Up being like a very central figure in a lot of the conversations we have around film. I think the way it blends reality with non-reality, with fiction, is phenomenal. But I had not heard of The Wind Will Carry Us as a film of his. And so I started taking this class on international cinema at the University of Houston. And our professor, which I think you know of him, he was in the why am I blanking on
Mr.
his
Alessandro
name?
Carrera.
Not Carrera, the
Oh,
other one, the one
damn.
who's the head of the world cultures department at the university. He's Italian.
Yeah,
Uh,
isn't that Carrera?
is it Carrera?
Yeah, that's Carrera. He's the director of Italian studies. Yeah,
Okay, then
yeah,
yes,
yeah, yeah,
you're absolutely correct.
yeah.
Yes. You got me.
Soon to
Like,
be guest on this podcast, by the way. Soon
oh
to
my
be
god,
guest. Yes, we are going to sit down to do 8.5 soon.
I'm such a big fan of his, and I was at MFAH when he gave the forward and the presentation for when we watched.
Marco.
Uh, yes,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
Yeah. That was a phenomenal introduction to that movie, and really readjusted my my viewing experience of the movie. But during his class, we he decided to show us The Wind Will Carry Us, um, and I was obsessed. I became obsessed with the notion of the movie, the ideas in the movies. We had discussions in the class about the poetic nature of it. And it's always been a movie that I've wanted to discuss at a deeper level, but it is a difficult movie to discuss at a deeper level because it is so open to kind of a lot of interpretations, even though it is grounded in a very kind of linear plot, but everything around it is very nonlinear, and it's kind of like it's one of those movies where like we talk about movies nowadays, it's like eschewing genres and melting genres and blending them. This movie has a subtlety about ignoring genres, like just pretending like they don't exist. That's really fascinating to me. So
Yeah.
when we were having these conversations and after we talked about the Passion of the Christ, I love that conversation feeling like Passion of the Christ is such a chaotic movie
Yeah.
that I genuinely felt like The Wind Will Carry Us is kind of like, it's not an antithesis to it, but it is in a sense kind of showing the chaos and the calmness,
Yeah.
like in quiet things, how chaotic they can be.
Yeah.
There's little scenes in this movie that we'll probably get into that I think are like really emblematic of that vision. So that's why I suggested it for us to talk about specifically.
Yeah, man, and I think it's just so great that, like, your last episode is the last temptation of Christ, and it's like, oh, we did the last episode on friggin' Martin Scorsese, who's this man's biggest fan, and now we get to talk about this
Yeah,
man here in this film. But
fact.
yeah, I watched this film. This wasn't the first time I watched this film. I watched this film for our Abbas Kiarostami month over at the Nerd Corps that we did every December. We do a director that none of us have heard about, but that year that we did him, what's it called? You were told me about this man, and I had told Brad. I was like, Brad, there's this guy called Abbas Kiarostami, and I've heard a lot about him, and I think we should probably explore his films. Like I've never watched any of his movies. We should do it. So it was me, him, and another friend, and we did like, okay, let's do it. And this was one of the movies that we watched. Um, Brad wasn't as like receptive to it as I thought he would be. He was really annoyed with the fact that the guy had to keep going up the mountain to answer his phone. And he was like, every
No.
time I saw that guy get a call, I dreaded it because I knew he had to go up the freaking mountain. And but I think what's called Brad has come a long way from where he would see movies back then. So I wonder what would happen if we rescreened it and we would
Yeah,
revisit that movie.
that would be
But
very interesting.
but yeah, I watched it and I was blown away by this film. I Part of me was like, also for some reason I had like this great motion to like feeling so cathartic watching those beautiful sceneries, and how, like, oh my god, like I feel like I feel like so close to this story about this person who's just waiting around to see this person die. And while he's there, he's also looking at the way that the community works with each other and the way that everybody kind of like interacts with each other. And it made me feel so cathartic, and at points it made me really want to cry. I was like, I don't know why I'm being moved this way, but I feel so close and connected to it. And I was just so happy that you chose this movie because it was one that I wanted to rewatch again, and I
Mhm.
wanted to get to it. I would like to get the Blu-ray for this, but I don't know if they'll ever do another new one or anything, because I get like you said, this movie's like, its information is very limited, and I wonder, like, what is the state of the print that we have at the moment and all these things. But
Mhm.
I thought this movie was fantastic. AK, this movie is
Yeah.
it's beautiful. It's one of his best movies. Like I said, I think I definitely put Close Up and Taste of Cherry above it, but it's
Mhm.
very special. It's very special in the way that I think this movie encapsulates, like, his career in general. I honestly do believe if he would have said that this one was the last one in his career in 1999, which I highly doubt that would have happened because
Yeah.
Kiarostami would not have stopped working at this. I think this one would have really, like, encapsulated everything that had to do with Kiarostami's career.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. I think that this movie is also fascinating from the perspective of its actual like release year. It
Mm-hmm.
being in 1999, where Kurosawa started the decade by releasing Close Up
So, yeah.
and then going through A Taste of Cherry and then getting to this movie. Um, One of the most like illuminating things about this movie and the way I think of it really is considering how it is in smack dab in the middle of this transitional period for him as a director and an artist and the notion of his change, and it's kind of this like bookend to this Iranian specific cinema that he was making at the time, and his transition into much broader themes that are outside of nationality, personhood, that are outside of like borders to a certain extent. And it's kind of like you can look at this movie from a lot of prongs, but one prong you can definitely look at this movie from is this idea of like Kursami kind of standing at the edge of Iran and looking at the beauty of the country he tried so desperately to capture it in film, the people in it that he's tried to capture in cinema, and kind of essentially saying goodbye to it.
Yeah.
Uh, and kind of moving on to the next chapter of his life where he started creating those movies that are outside of Iran that had notions of intimacy and these secrets. And just a side note, I showed this movie to my mom. Like she literally watched it with me
Yeah. Oh,
this time
nice.
around. Yeah, and it was a fascinating thing to have her see very quickly, like within the first few scenes. When I've explained like kind of the premise of the movie, I was like, it is this man who is coming into this village to capture this secret ceremony. And within the first few shots, my mom turns to me and it's like, this is all of us. All of us in the Middle East have pride in having secrets. We want to
Up.
have secrets. We want to keep secrets. If we talk about the things that are most intimate to us, that is the darkest in ourselves, it is considered something that is not only weakness, but is belittling. You're belittling yourself. You're belittling your pride, your authority onto the world by speaking your secrets out loud.
Yeah.
And this pursuit for Kiarostami to kind of capture secrets, the hidden things in his nation, are at one very voyeuristic and
Yeah.
could be viewed as problematic. And I think he tackles how problematic it is in this movie, especially. And then on the other end, it is this pursuit that he's been trying to do for most of his career. And I think his transition away from Iran is kind of accepting what Iran is, accepting what the death of that form of cinema is, and moving to the next one. I mean, like, I'm jumping around, but like
Yeah.
that final scene is very much that bookend of like living in the present is a really important thing for a lot of humans. And even if we believe in the afterlife, no one has ever come back to tell us what it's like.
Yeah.
So he was kind of rolling into that unknown, throwing away that bone, going and driving away after capturing the final picture of something that is sacred, secret, and that is held very closely to the
Mm-hmm.
people that are involved in it, and then kind of moving away from it. And I think Abbas's career has also moved away from a lot of those imagery. So I think it's a special movie to see kind of like his epilogue to kind of that period of his life.
Yeah.
And it's really fascinating in that sense. Also, to Brad's point, it's living in a village, my guy. This is what happens when you this is the most American thing. If you live in a village or by a village, you know what's up. You 2023 that most villages still don't have antennas wide
Yep.
enough. You still got to get on top of the mountain to
Yep.
make that goddamn call.
Yeah. And I'll say this last thing before we get into the conversation, but we also, like, I think people need to remember that Abbas was one of the few directors to stay in Iran after the revolution and make movies
Mhm.
in Iran. And I think that that has such an integral part into why this movie plays the way it does. But with that said, we teased you all long enough.
Yep.
Are you ready, AK?
I'm roaring to go.
All right. This is our conversation on Abbas Kiarostami's The Wind Will Carry Us. So, as AK did describe, the film does revolve around this man who is a journalist, but he is going under the disguise of an engineer, and he's supposed to be capturing the ceremony of this woman at in this village who's supposedly dying soon. Soon is such an understatement because it is not soon. But then again, what one thing I will always stress about what's it called, people, ethnic people in general, is our perception of time, because what's it called, every time what's it called, G always asks me like, wait, when you're saying right now, what do you mean by right now or right now? I'm like, I don't know, because what's it called, right now to me could always be like, maybe like at the end of the week,
A couple days more,
a
3 days
days more.
more,
Yeah.
another week.
Yeah.
We'll see how it goes. Yeah, for
But he
sure.
goes with a I'm sorry, okay.
Oh no. Go ahead. Finish the little intro.
Yeah, but he goes with a crew, and they stay there. They're waiting to capture this ceremony, and the people of the village, welcome them with open arms and give them a place to stay and everything. But as days go by, the crew gets restless, but the man, the journalist, becomes infatuated and really starts to become, aware of like these parts of life that mean a lot more than just capturing this ceremony. And yeah, AK, I
Hmm.
know that a big part of this movie is the poetry of this film. I mean,
Yeah,
it's the just because, like I said, Abbas is not a filmmaker who will just put something in there just to put it in. You
exactly.
know, the way that the wind like flows, the
Hmm.
way that the bike is what's called riding along,
Winding.
it
Yeah.
all has something to do with the film.
Hmm.
It's and that I'm thinking of that specific scene when they're just going in the bike. It reminds you of one of the from the opening scene of Mirror from Tarkovsky when the wind just blows
Always.
and it
Yep.
feels so relaxing and it just feels like you've been transformed. And for that to be put into the end of this one now, into this film, it's like it's very relaxing. But I know a big part of this movie is about the poetry. And you told me when you selected this film, you're like, I want to talk about this film because this is one of those examples of like poetry in motion.
Yep. It's true. It is poetry in motion. Yeah, I do think that like there's a notion in here that is combined in a lot of things you just mentioned: the passage of time, the very square put together shots of everything that kind of make the camera almost disappear into the things we're looking at. uh, in a lot of those motions, there's this poetic nature. Like we're going through these verses as the acts move together in the movie, and and it's not a one to one. Like the movie has poetry passages in it where poetry gets brought up in a sense of like we're in this moment. Poetry is speaking to this moment. When he talks about why is it called Black Village, it state like the poem. I'm going to butcher it, but he goes something like, um, "You can't wash the black away, uh, no matter how much holy water you spill on it. You can't turn it white." And like, it's that moment where you're sitting, where there's this like veil of darkness of waiting for this woman to pass away. Two side notes I want to mention very quickly about how light information about this movie is in general. There's actually dispute about if he is a journalist, if he's a filmmaker, if he's a,
Photographer.
a photographer. There is dispute about what his purpose in there is. I think the re-release of the film mentions that he is a journalist, but actually a lot of critics from back in the day thought that he was a photographer coming to kind of see this really sacred moment. I ascribe more to the photography part because I don't know what kind of article. I'm in journalism. I worked in journalism for a
Yeah.
very long time. I don't know what peg you would send three full journalists
Yeah,
over
that's
to
the
a
part
film.
that confuses me. That's why I would think like I think he's more of a photographer or a filmmaker.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
feel like he's a filmmaker and he's going location scouting. And when he
exactly.
went location scouting, he heard about this ceremony, so he
Yeah.
decided to bring his crew and to like find out about like what his next movie will be about.
Yeah, I don't even think he's that involved. I think he was high because you see in those phone calls that he's trying to get back, he is calling his bosses. There's this entire conversation in the movie about your servitude to your boss and what they want to give you.
Mm-hmm.
And you speak about him kind of rubbing Tehran essentially. There's also another thing that I should mention. There is a lot of information, there's quite a bit of like uh secondary sources that say that the village, and when my mom watched it, she was very adamant in being like, oh, this seems like a Kurdish village. The ceremony they're speaking
Mm-hmm.
about is a Kurdish ceremony. So there is a point to them being Iranians going into essentially a Kurdish village, kind of like we speak about ethnicity sometimes as a monolith, but ethnicities exist within other ethnicities. And
Mm-hmm.
while all of them could be Iranian, all of them could be Persian in culture, being Persian and being Kurdish are things that have fundamental differences. And so it is this kind of like colonizing nature also to this movie
Mm-hmm.
of we are the dominant society and we want to find out what you're doing in the dark when no one is looking at you. There is that notion to it. And I think bringing that element brings the politics of cinema in a real and fundamental way. A lot of ways we try to separate the politics of filmmaking, and you just can't. The politics of the present are the politics of the film you are watching.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and that's all a part of the poetry that this movie goes through, because it's so kind of ethereal in its motion. It moves through everything kind of like the wind in the title of the movie. And so it all kind of blends into, you're just watching these people exist. And their life is so idyllic and so beautiful. My mom like yelled while we were watching the movie. She was like, you're doing a show about it. You have to talk about the architecture. Um,
Oh yeah.
because everything blends into the motion of everything. You spoke in the intro about the elevation of everything, and what you see in the camera is what you don't see outside of the frame. And I think the movie does a really great job of, when it takes you into a POV, a first person POV of someone looking at something, you already know what's happening behind them, because the shot set up what you're looking behind them in a wide shot. And it's kind of that, there's a mathematics behind everything that's working, but it's kind of when you get into these really complicated maths, it kind of blends away and it becomes just philosophy.
Yeah.
Uh,
Well, it also like it's in a way like, and I'm thinking back to the other films of his, because he does something similar like in Then Life Goes On, because, but of course that's more relating to like the earthquake it happened. So like there's things that are just like, there's rubble and everything, and but the way that the architecture plays a really big part in that as well,
yeah.
has a lot to say. Um, but yes, the poetry is found in a lot of things. It's the wind, and even the small things, right? Like
Hmm.
when he's shaving and he's looking into the actual camera, it's
Yeah.
like in a way it's saying like this lens, this thing that is supposed to be crafting our obstruction of reality in cinema, has disappeared.
Yeah.
I'm looking at you and shaving, like as
Yeah.
if you are just my mirror.
Yep.
Like this,
Exactly.
like we're no longer being separated by this wall. I've
Hmm.
broken that wall, and I'm just inviting you to view life as I'm viewing it right now.
Yeah. And also, you're a part of the scenery.
Yeah.
Like, again, going back to the politics of the whole situation, I'm invading the space, right?
Mm-hmm.
The space that is taking care of me, that is giving me everything I want. If I ask for milk, if I ask for apples, if I ask for strawberries, it's all given to me as an honored guest
Mm-hmm.
of this location that I'm in. And so you're blending in. You're the audience I brought to this
Yeah.
location that had no audience before. The movie starts with showing you that there is an audience for him from the village. But as he kind of blended in with the village, they kind of stopped looking at him
Yeah.
in general. And then we became the onlookers.
Yeah.
He was essentially guiding us into it. There's this one particular quote that talks about the relationship between um, violation of the space you're entering to capture it naturally. There's this paradox that happens for every person that works with a camera. You're invading a natural moment by introducing a camera to it. Everything will change once you introduce a camera to something and you point it at something. No matter how much you make that camera invisible, it is still the loudest thing in the room.
Mm-hmm.
And so someone said this. Someone said, this is from Scott Fondas from Variety magazine, who was putting this in a list of critically acclaimed movies. Um, and he said that uh, where's the beginning? Travels to a remote Kurdish village with the intent to photograph. This is all we talked about, haunting and poetic. And and the witty, haunting, and poetic film that follows is about the photographer and Kiarostami's own struggle to complete that mission, to capture something of the real life on film without violating its essence. Kiarostami himself has not worked on a film since, preferring the more portable and less invasive technology of video. Call it the first true film of the digital revolution.
Yeah.
This film was also filmed on digital cameras.
Oh, this was
Um,
on digital. Oh crap! I thought the 10 was his first one that he did on digital.
it seems like this was his. I didn't realize that this was a part of this quote, but to me, the the artistic notion of this is Kurosawa for the majority of that decade was kind of struggling with this idea in his films. Maybe he had already figured it out and was just kind of showcasing in his film. But the struggle, the conflict he was showing. And there are a lot of conflicts in this film. Modernity versus nature, all of those stuff. The past versus the future, uh, time versus the present, like all of those things. But one of those conflicts in the movie is this notion of like, how do we introduce things that are unnatural into a natural space and still capture the natural essence of it all? And I think the movie hypothesizes that maybe you don't, or if you do, you have to let go of what you want. The
Yeah.
purpose you invaded the space with, you have to let it go, which is really hard. If you're going into a space to capture something in its natural habitat, you have to then let go of the camera. So you can't actually film it. You can't capture it in any sense.
Yeah.
This idea of like we're capturing something. The camera captures
And
footage.
and that's why, like, at first when he tries to take a photo of the woman who's giving him tea, she's like, "Don't take a photo of me, please."
Yep.
And then she's like,
Yep.
and then he tries it again, and he's like, "I told you already once. Please do not take a photo of me." And he doesn't try it again until the very end when the ceremony is happening, and you can tell the women are kind of like, I don't want you to be taking a photo," but then they look at him, they're like, "We see him as one of us. Let's just let him capture this because
But
like
also he abandoned
yeah,
what he is. For those 3 weeks that he's been staying in this village, he kind of
yeah,
let go of all of that. He didn't know. There's little things about this movie that really kind of like once you explore them, and I understand hokey film nerds, hyper analyzing film, it can be really annoying sometimes. But when movies give you
that's
these
what this whole
nuggets,
podcast is about.
I get it. No, I get. I mean, I'm a part of that world and that realm. Like
Yeah,
that is my passion. That is my love. So I understand how to other people it could seem really, really that way. But like when a movie gives you that nugget on kind of a silver platter, he has not thought about his camera for so long,
yeah,
and he slowly started to desync with the camera. He left it in the car and it almost got stolen. He left it in the coffee shop. And then eventually, when he realizes that this woman is about to die after he talked to the doctor, he is desperately like, where's the gear? Where's the equipment? He doesn't know where it is. He
yeah,
doesn't even know where his partners are anymore. Because, like, there's a big reason why those two aren't visible the entire movie. Because the moment he entered the village, they became invisible to him
yeah, yep,
because everything that became present is this village. And then eventually, by the end of the movie, they're just gone. He doesn't even know where they are. He
yeah,
tries to look back for his old life and he doesn't find it anymore. And by the end of the movie, I think you bring up a really good point. And I think that's where movies are like, where we talk about the idea of movies being open to interpretation. Because the interpretation I took is that he abandoned the village at the end. He said, I'm going to take this picture and I've decided that I'm going to go back to this life where I'm constantly answering phone calls. Brad's biggest annoying is that keeps going up the hill to answer the phone. That's the point. Life in the city, life in modernity is irritating. It is
yeah,
constantly being bombarded by things. And it's like you get shocked when they tell you the time passage. They're like, you told us it was going to be a week ago. And it was like 2 weeks have passed. What happened? You also, the movie
hmm,
programs you to forget how much time has passed. The characters have to essentially kind of tell you in really subtle ways that like this is the next day, because sometimes he doesn't even change his clothes because he's forgetting about all these things he needs to do
yeah,
in those moments. And so like yeah, like, and I think that it is very true, the village accepted the picture because
hmm,
he had integrated. I think that that is a great interpretation of what's happening on the side of the Kurdish villagers that are
yeah,
living in there, because they were awkward with him. He
yeah,
tries to bring in those pieces of modernity where he asks the lady about her pregnancy and she's like, why would you ask me about something so
Yeah,
private right
yeah,
now? It's really awkward. He asked a 16-year-old girl like her education and whatever, and she's like, why are you asking me about my personal life? I'm just here to give you milk.
yeah,
And it's those moments of clash where they're also like invading his space, invading his understanding of things, where they're refusing to let him in.
yeah.
Uh, and he becomes frustrated by it, right? He gets frustrated by the kid telling him the truth, saying the truth constantly.
And it's interesting because like you bring on the colonizing look into it, and one of the big parts that I noticed in this film was the gender roles, and it wasn't really like his surprise that that they're like this. It's the fact that like he's coming in as this Iranian man into this Kurdish village, and I think his surprise is more so the fact like, oh, the Kurds think of do this too. Like
Yeah,
he's surprised that like these people are very similar to me. And
yeah,
like I'm coming in here thinking that I'm going to experience a new culture, but it's like it's very similar to the one that I'm in because he asked the lady like he goes like, "Oh, like why are you serving me the tea?" And she's like, "What are you talking about? Who served you tea?" He goes, "Well, my mom." Who served your what's it called your father tea?
yeah,
Goes his
yeah,
wife, my mom,
yeah,
and he's like, so then why would you be asking me why are you serving my tea? Like it's
yeah,
customary. I'm going to be the one to serve you the tea, and then the old man gets into it and discussing the gender roles as well. But
mhm,
there's also ways that like they're kind of like breaking the gender role too because of the girl who's working on there. He's like, oh, I didn't go to school. Like
yeah,
I left after a while, and now I sell this milk, and
yeah.
and that also reminds me a lot of like
So
how
the poem he recites, by the way, in that scene, I don't know if you know this, but the poem he recites is the poem "The Wind Will Carry Us"
yes,
when he's
yes,
sitting with her while she's milking.
yeah,
And then he tells her the story of the poet who wrote the poem "The Wind Will Carry Us," and he's like, she wrote she wrote this poem. She was uh, like you, and she was like, "What do you mean?" And he was like, "She left school
mm-hmm,
five after 5 years, and academics does not mean you can be good at poetry. Poetry is life, and it's also bringing the reality of the situation, like the movie
yeah,
we are watching, the meta thing
yeah,
that we're outside, they bring it into the movie into a really subtle conversation. It's like so the opposite of how we consider breaking the fourth wall in American cinema,
yeah,
which is either the character speaking directly to us or narration or flashbacks or any of those concepts that break the immersion of the scene we're in. They're like, no, we're going to stay here and we're going to talk about how we're in a manufactured space.
yeah. And like and that just it reminded me a lot of like the way that you know that we view gender roles as like this thing like okay like the women can't work, they have to be at the home, but he has this little girl who's like this child who's working,
Yeah.
and it reminds me a lot of like
Or the
my
lady
family,
serving tea.
yeah, like my
Or the,
family, right?
yeah,
Because like they were very like oh, my grandmother had to leave school in elementary school because she had to start taking care of her family and she had to start working.
yeah,
So it was the same thing for my maternal grandmother as well. And this man is just like he's kind of shocked in a way, and but also he wants to kind of give this little girl hope because he feels like she is able to become something like the poet that he's reciting. And he's like,
exactly.
just because you didn't go to school doesn't mean that you can't write poetry. Like it has nothing
Mhm.
to do. It's poetry, something that you feel inside. It's something that you can create from your heart instead of your brain.
Yeah. And then again, but again, it is an invasion of
Yeah.
of space to a certain extent.
Oh
You
yeah, yeah,
you're imparting this thing, this like other worldview onto this girl, and maybe she is happy in the worldview that she has. And those conversations is like every time we have a conversation, humans have conversations with each other, we're imparting our experience onto them, and
mm-hmm.
there is a consensual experience to accepting that invasion of space. Your experience is like this. I've had a similar experience. This is how I dealt with it. There is a consensual of like, I'm going to accept their worldview in this moment when it happens. And like the girl is receptive to it, right? She
Mm-hmm.
you could take the interpretation of her not accepting money in multiple different ways, whether he is a guest, he is a colonizer, he's a dominant, or he is a helper, he is a person who's trying to find his way, he's a person who's lost in some way and trying to find something and is willing to kind of have really tender conversations to get to those places.
Mm-hmm.
um
And I don't know how it works for your culture, AK, because it's every culture is very different. But at least when I saw that money, I was thinking about mine, and it's like it is so hard for us to accept money here.
yeah.
Like giving a, we would rather you come in, cook us a full course meal. We'll let you do that for us. But the minute you take out a $10 bill and try to hand it to us, we're like, no, 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 no. We don't need
Right.
it. We don't need
Yeah,
it. Don't. Thank you. Just
yeah,
don't worry about it. We don't need it. And it's like,
exactly.
in a way, she was like, I think like that moment to me spoke a lot because she was like, I gave you this from my heart. I gave you this
Yeah.
because like it's what I've been taught to do. And
Yep.
once you bring this, monetary thing into the equation, you're making it seem like I'm your servant.
Hmm. But there is conflict
Yeah,
there, right?
there's
Because
major
like all
conflict.
all of them work. Like there's a big like underlying theme in all of this is that all of them work all the time. He asks the pregnant ladies like, where's your husband? It's like he works except for 3 months in the winter. And then and in her mind she can't imagine the men not working because she's like, for 3 months he doesn't do shit, like he doesn't do anything. He just sits on his butt and drinks tea. And it's like, he goes he talks to the guy in the hole and he's like, my boss told me I need to dig this hole here. Like, that's what I'm doing, I'm just digging this hole for my boss. The guy who talks about his mom mourning when we first discover maybe some pieces of what the ceremony is, he goes like, to prove that like jobs are competitive and like to get this job, my dad had to prove that he mourned harder than the other guys, so my mom scratched herself like it was a family member.
Yeah,
And so, like, when the older woman accepts the money, the younger, more innocent person runs out and is like, no, no, like, we're forgetting what we are. Like, we're forgetting what this is. He's a guest. He's asking for something from us,
yeah.
and whatever.
And
And
how
the
do you
grandmother remembers.
and how do you think that relates to the little boy? Because I think the little boy's such a interesting figure within this film, because like so he's obviously the most innocent in this film.
Mhm.
He's always talks about how like, oh, like this lady, like, like he has to, like, oh, if there was one thing you could get right now, he asked the boy, like, if there's one thing you could have right now, what would it be? And he's like, he so innocently just says like, oh, for this woman to not die. Like,
Yeah,
I don't want her to die.
yeah. And like the kid, like surface level, like not even surface level, like the high level theme there is exactly what you said: innocence of self, past self,
Yeah.
looking at the world from the lens of like what it is instead of what you want from it. There's a moment where the main character of the movie, the photographer, talks about how like the kid reminds him of himself. He didn't like to keep secrets, so he told everyone's secrets because he felt better about telling the secret than keeping it, which is such a true notion for like
Yeah.
us when we were growing up. uh, there's all of that at a high level, but there is this struggle between the two. He's a man of modernity, and this kid is also the byproduct, the child of this village life, of this simple past life. And there's a lack, there's a purposeful lack of knowledge in the kid, where he's like, I do go to school, I do really well in school and all of that, but I work the fields. Like my dad worked the fields, like my grandpa worked the fields. We like we bring each other bread and food in the village. Like I'm very stubborn about this way of life. And the moment he saw aggression from this new style of life, he was like, I want no part of it. I'm not
Yeah.
getting in the car. I'm not getting in the car. I'm going to go to the field. Your apology doesn't matter to me. So there's this stubbornness of like, the main character saw himself in this child, and this child made the choices like, I'm not participating in this voyeurism anymore, and he disappears from the movie.
Mm-hmm.
Like the whole car scene, he's off camera. He's
Yeah.
happening off camera like the others because
You
he
see just a
disappears.
glimpse of him in the
Yeah,
back mirror. You don't
in the
even see
back
him.
mirror because he's driving away from him. Like again, these are older movies. Those things that now like a lot of newer movies tries to constantly subvert your expectations. Older movies don't try to do that. When someone drives away from someone in an older movie, they are driving
They're
away
driving
from that
away.
person and forgetting them. Like,
Yeah, who cares about the reversal? Yeah,
yeah,
someone's just driving
exactly.
away.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And it's like it's that moment. And in me, that's why I think the photographer chose modernity again. He
Hmm.
abandoned this idyllic life that he was living because everyone else that existed in this idyllic life started to become more and more invisible to him as he realized that someone is going to die. Either the man in the hole is going to die
Yeah.
or the lady. And we see neither of them because they're not persons. They're this idea of something, of
Hmm.
life and death and servitude and working your entire life to get to somewhere.
Yeah. And what's it called? That relates so well because this this community, and I wanted to talk about the community because it's just it's beautiful the way that like yes we can open our arms and let you come in, but we have to build our trust with you, and you can tell within the community like oh this woman is sending like water or like oh this woman is sending
Soup.
like this food and stuff to them so that way they can be taken care of and everything. It's just like it's very different in the way that it works within like a modern the cityscapes. It's like
Yeah.
where you're supposed to stay by yourself, you're not supposed to really interact with your neighbors all that much.
Hmm.
And how it's become very like individualistic compared to like the community here where they feel like
Exactly.
very connected to each other, that like we're literally waiting for this person to die and for all of
That's the
us
tension of
to
the movie, right?
yeah,
Yeah,
we're
exactly.
all waiting to collectively mourn together instead of shutting our doors and mourning by ourselves.
I mean, but also on the other end of it, the movie tells you, I'm not going to show you this person
Yeah,
who's dying
exactly. Yeah.
because you have to feel what the photographer's feeling. His anticipation isn't to mourn. His anticipation
Just to,
is to get something out of it, to get what he wants out of it. And so we're all waiting. Does he get what he wants? And then we forget that there is a person. But you think about
mm-hmm,
the movie and how they describe this lady. And you're like, she's a person. Like
mm-hmm,
when the doctor talks about her, she's like, she's an old woman, like old
yeah,
age. Like they don't even give her a personhood or a name. They call her the invalid.
yeah,
Like, because at the end of the day, she's supposed to personify a person in your life, in all of our lives, that kind of just got old. And
oh,
it's we can't at some point we have to give up what we want from them
mm,
and mourn. And then it becomes the choice of the audience. I think then that becomes the choice of the audience. Do we accept the photographer's worldview, or do we say that it's a good thing that we didn't get to, because we don't really see much of the ceremony.
yeah,
And he kind of is just really like fucking cowardly about it. He takes a
mm-hmm.
picture and runs away. And it
And even
does
the
feel
fact
like
that he's taking it inside of his car, and you think about like this photographer, like oh, you would think like if he actually really wanted this picture, he would have gotten outside that car and gotten in several angles of it. But
exactly.
instead, he's cowardly about it. He's taking it from inside of his car in like a dark space so that he doesn't get seen, and he just drives away.
Yeah, because at the end, we all, him, us, the audience, all realized a person just died for this village. And
Mm-hmm.
like, uh, even if they have a special secret ceremony, I assume all of us, as we exist and we have people that we mourn for, we have special and secret ceremonies
Mm-hmm.
in our families that we conduct. And there is this like uncouthness about invading a private moment of someone.
Yeah.
But
It,
there is this importance about showing your vulnerability.
yeah.
And
It in like and this is why and I'll bring something up and I'll get a little bit personal with my life here, because it's something that related a lot to how it worked with my friend Luis. My friend Luis, we went together with my brother. We went to our my mother's memorial last year, and he felt the same way. because he pulled out his film camera, and he said, because when we were doing our big ceremony, when we were finally laying the dirt into the actual, the thing that was going to be planted into the ground to go into the tree, and he said, I'm invading this space, like
Mhm.
I'm invading it, but I know from my heart that you want this very vulnerable moment to live forever with you.
Yeah.
So if I can grab this picture for you, it's gonna mean more to you.
Yeah.
But I know that I'm invading this space, and I feel
Hmm.
like that's kind of how, that photographer feels at the end. He's like, yes, and that's why I think my interpretation when he throws the bone, I don't think he's gonna turn these photos in. I don't.
Oh,
I
oh, interesting.
my interpretation is that he throws that bone, he lets go of that life, and he says, "I'm not gonna turn these photos in." I feel like he's gonna develop them and he's gonna keep them himself, but he's not gonna turn them in to the
That's a really
for the
interesting
job.
take. I didn't think of that. That is
Yeah,
really
and
fascinating.
I don't know why. I I don't know why I thought he threw the camera in the end. I even had to rewind it. I was like, what is this? I remember this movie is like he threw the camera away, or he threw the film away. But no, that's not how it worked out at all. He threw the bone.
Yeah.
Um, but to me, that's what I feel like he made his mind up as he was saw it, and he saw those women how they looked at him and they were saying goodbye to him, and he finally realized like, oh, they finally accepted me as their own.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
when he,
that's a really good point. Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
And like to go back to rewind a little bit to talk about like the sense of community, because I think my mother would kill me if I didn't talk about the architecture of
oh
all of
yeah.
it. Uh, Even from my mom's perspective, who has seen multiple villages, she lived in the city for most of her life. She was born in the city, all of that stuff, but they used to visit a lot of villages. And she was like, even for us, this is talking about just location scouting for the actual movie. She's like, I've never seen a village like this. Like, we have villages that are built out of clay and out of the mountains and stuff like that. But the way the elevation is built, the way you have to climb from a roof to go into a road, to go into someone, you like come down from your roof into someone else's window, which is actually their door to their house. And it's all of that, like, but again, all those movements, because everyone in that village has lived in that village. And you see him become more comfortable. When he comes into the village, he's struggling to climb the rock and follow the kid who's already like feet ahead of him. And by the end, he's like running around the village like it's his own home. And that's poetry. That's also
Mhm.
poetry. That seamless motion that they have. Whatever city you live in, your neighborhood, you move through it very seamlessly. You know where the corner store is, you know where the
Mhm.
CVS is at, where the Walgreens is at, all that stuff.
Yeah.
So, but that elevation makes everything seem so much more dimensional and textured in a way that gives you this sense that they're like, we talk about people living in a city. You talked about the notion of like they're very similar to us,
Mhm.
and it's true because like we talk about the notion in a city of living on top of each other. People live on top of it. These people are literally living on
On
top of
top.
each other. Like it's not that much varied. It's just that
Yeah.
they're in the space that they're existing in. They have a dependency to depend on each other to get certain things. And that vulnerability also can be shared between them, but unspoken. They call her the invalid because they can't speak on her humanity, uh, and all that stuff. But yeah, there's that. We go back. Yeah, there's that invasion of a private moment. What I took from the throwing away of the bone is his callousness with death. You saw him at the beginning of the movie get the bone and kind of scratch his leg with it, and it's like a dead thing. This is a dead thing. There's modernity has a very severe lack of respect for dead things. Living things important because they provide value. Dead things have no value.
Mhm.
And so the turtle, he essentially tries to kill the freaking
Yeah.
turtle.
Which, yeah, what a dick move, man. What a dick
I
move.
know.
Poor
And that's
turtle.
him rejecting that village life at the end of the movie. There's a tragedy to this in which he's been accepted, but he rejects it. Deep down inside of him, he rejects it. He wants to reject it. And so he flips the turtle. But these things never go away. The sense of wanting, of belonging, of community, that architecture, going back, the seamlessness of moving into that village, knowing how to pour yourself some tea, knowing where to go to get your milk, and knowing how to get the teacher or the little kid out of class because you need him or whatever. All that stuff, knowing all those little things, that always kind of stays with you. And that's really one of the more interesting scenes that I liked. Is there's only like 3 or 4 shots where we cut away from his point of view, or from his POV. When we see the bone float through the river, and when we see when the car is first coming in, we're really far away from them, and we don't know who our characters are, so we don't get a point of view of his. And the third shot, it just cuts away from him, like he's not in the scene for us to see the thing he's seeing, because everything we've been seeing is what he's seeing, and it's the turtle flipping back on its stomach to try and walk away. And there has to be, like, in my mind, movies aren't movies if that scene doesn't have symbolism.
Yeah.
Like, that scene has to be like, you try to invade this turtle's space, you try to kill this turtle to get something out of everything. Everything in the movie kind of contextualizes for me in that shot, and the turtle still flips back on its stomach and keeps walking like nothing happened. Because life keeps going. The wind will still carry you on.
Yeah, exactly. And I wanted the last thing, and I want a couple things here. I wanted to bring up the fact that, like, you were talking about like the architecture, and that's why it's so important that he brings up, like, Abbas brings up the fact that, like, what's not in the frame is more important. It's just as important what's in the frame.
Exactly.
Because we look at these shots and we're thinking like, oh no, what's in the horizon is what's important. We're not thinking about the fact that people are literally living on top of each other.
Exactly.
And
yeah.
Especially when he's talking to the worker, he's like, he's there, and you're looking at him like, why can't we just cut to the worker? Why can't we see? And it makes you think, it's like, why do you need to see him? Do you feel like if you can see him, it's important to you?
You can humanize him if you see
humanize him. Like, why can't you just be content with just hearing his voice and realizing, like, that's a person who's working there, who's digging a hole? That way you can get, just as scared when you find out that he's dying because he got trapped in the hole. And it's really interesting because you say, like, we don't see the woman, right? But we don't even see this guy. When they put him in the car, we only see his legs and feet.
His feet.
Yeah. And it's like, even that bit, even before that, you're already kind of worried of, like, oh my God, did this guy die? Did he die?
Yep.
Like, the movie did its job already of telling you, like, you don't have to see him to really feel for him.
Yeah. And then I think that's where death is unseen. Life is abundant around you. The doctor is a perfect representation of that.
Yeah. In the quote that he says. Yeah.
Like the doctor is life personified. He's like, I didn't want to specialize. He's a doctor. His job is to maintain life. Like, there's a connection between those two things of his pursuit of life. He's like, yeah, everyone here works all the time. The little kid, when they have their fight, he's like, but you're just sitting around. You're not working. Why would the ghost leave you? Right? Like, why would the spirit leave you? Why would you get frustrated with me? You're not working all the time. The work is like a very abundant thing. Life is for work, even for those people. We think that if we went and lived in the woods, away from society, away from wage labor and all of that stuff, work goes away. No, work just changes.
It's a different type of work.
Yeah. And the doctor is like, I do my work. I do what I need to do. And when I have free time, I look at all this life around me, because at some point I'm going to lose it. And the quote he gives him at the end, right? It's like they tell us that heaven is great, but no one has ever come back and told us what it's actually like.
Yes.
And so, like, living in the present, I have to enjoy every moment of this life, of everything that's around me. And And
it reminds you of why that celebration, that what's called that ceremony is so important, because it's also a celebration of that woman's life. It's a
exactly.
celebration of like the fact that
And the
that
fear of
the
death.
fear of death, and we learn through that like that's why I should be more focused on letting my life slow down a little bit, not trying to me get to the end of this race.
Yep.
Instead, just
Yep.
living in this moment, taking the quietness, and really digesting what is happening in my life instead of trying to make it to the end. Because
Yeah.
even though they tell me so much, what is so beautiful about like what is waiting for me, nobody has ever come back to tell me how beautiful it is.
Yeah. And you could tell Brad, he gets a phone call at the end of the movie on the motorcycle.
Yep.
And every scene in the movie, he's like, stay on the line, stay on the line. I will get there. And in this one, he's like, it just cut off. And he hangs up his phone.
Yeah.
And he decides that, like, for this moment, he's going to be with this dang doctor on the back of this motorcycle.
Yeah.
And he's going to ride to this hospital and see if this man is alive.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's all it is at that moment. And but the movie kind of like, talk about a plot twist. We get this idyllic ending. The movie could have faded at that moment on
Yeah.
the motorcycle. That is a perfect ending for a movie. And then it was like, nope, he can't let go. He cannot let go of what he wants. He looks for his gear. He looks for his partners. He goes, he finds out she dies, and he takes the picture and he runs away and he throws the bone, saying that, like, this life, I'm going to abandon it. And then he goes. And at least that's my interpretation of
Yeah.
it.
Hey, very
Um,
valid interpretation. I think that's a really
yeah.
interesting way to look at it as well.
Yeah,
Um,
but I do think that there's a power to the fact that the the third shot we see that's away from him is that bone floating through the river. We see the goats, we see nature
mhm.
as it is, and it's like he threw away this piece, sure, but he's never getting away from it. It's
Yeah.
always going to come back. It's always going to be carried by the wind
Yeah.
back here.
It's gonna come back to where it was where it belonged.
Yeah.
But is there anything else you want to bring up, or
I
shall we?
just want to say that even in this conversation, like, you talk, almost every scene is so loaded and so carried. The dialogue is really slight,
Mhm.
but the script writers were very important in this. So support your script writers.
Oh yeah.
They're very important because every line was intentional in what they said. The man feeling awkward about singing because men don't sing around other men is like, is such, like, that is a great line to write in
Yeah.
there. Like the interstitials of the poems in there. The shots are really not that elaborate. I
No,
mean,
no.
but everything is so beautiful
Mhm.
in them, and you have to just absorb everything in there. But every shot carries some sort of
Yeah.
something in it. It has
Yeah.
some sort of intentionality in it,
And
and it's
it's so interesting that you bring that up, AK, because there's a shot when he's leaving in the car, and you see the goats come into frame, and one of them is humping the other one.
other one. Yeah,
Yeah, and I'm thinking like, everything's intentional, so it's like, life continues here.
yep.
Literally, there's life being made when he's humping him.
Yeah, yeah. He talks to the lady, and, like, you talk about the gender roles. We didn't even touch on the fact that all the women are working.
Yeah,
This motherfucker made 9 babies. This was her 10th baby. That's work. That's
that's
so much
work.
work.
And like
Yeah,
that's a big conversation for another film. But the fact is, like, yeah, like we've lost that a long time ago. Like, we don't see people have 11 kids anymore,
exactly,
because first of all,
exactly.
like, modernity
And she's
wise,
like
we have TV. to
she's so
entertain.
natural about it. She's like, wait, I saw your sister. It's like, no, you talked to me. And it's like, you were pregnant. She was like, yeah, I had the baby and I came back. It's like, yeah, I gotta get up and, like, do this
Yep.
every day, my guy. Like, what are we talking about?
Yeah. It's
And
like you're
and
surprised here, but like this is just how it works here.
here,
Like,
yeah, it's just what we are. And so, like, there's so many things where, like, there's like this, like, really powerful intentionality in everything. The movie isn't even that long. It's like an
Oh
hour,
no.
50 minutes.
Yeah.
It moves by so quickly. That's the magic of cinema to me. You
Yeah.
film this movie, and if I break it down, I can see every shot. I could call every scene cut. I can see where you put in dialogue. I can see all the pieces. When I watch it all together, it felt like 30 minutes. If
Yeah.
I felt like the photographer with time passing away.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. So it is.
It's
Yeah, it's
masterful.
yeah,
Yeah. It's
it's a
just
wonderful movie.
wonderful, and I think we just had an incredible conversation, and
Yeah.
I really do appreciate it. And I'll say that I know you talked about the shot, but before we get out of here and we'll finish it, my favorite shot in this whole movie is that last time that he goes in the car to go up the hill, and we stay in that position. We see those goats go out,
Yeah.
and we see the road and the cars going up the road. We're no longer
Beautiful.
following the car
Following it.
going up because we
Yeah.
know, like at this point, we know we're just observing at this point,
Yep.
and it was just such a beautiful, it's simple, very simple shot.
The shot.
But Abbas will always make beauty out of simplicity, and that
Yeah.
shot is just jaw dropping to me. It's beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, this is the man that was able to make a motorcycle through the streets of Tehran with shitty audio work as
Yeah,
like this
which
engrossing,
makes
beautiful
me
moment.
freaking cry. Makes me
Yeah.
freaking cry as we hear like the audio cutting in now because we know that that guy is just having a very heart to heart conversation with the man.
Yeah.
But
I wish we got that audio back.
yeah, yeah.
Maybe AI one day will give us that conversation, but maybe it's better not to know. You
Maybe
know?
there's beauty in the fact that we don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. That's I think that's a pure encapsulation of this movie.
yeah,
The beauty of everything in this movie is that we just don't see things. It's
yeah,
the things that we don't see. The women, the guy, the kid going away, the photographers that come in with him,
mhm,
the how people move through the city to get to him. Like the
yeah.
things we don't see in that movie are 100% just as important as the things we do see, and it's better that we don't know them.
Mhm. Well, AK, thank you so much for coming on. This was an
Hi.
incredible conversation that we just had.
Poetry in motion.
What's your emotion, baby? But you're not done here just yet. You've
Yeah.
got to claim a movie for next season that you want to do that nobody
Okay.
can take away for you. So when you return for season 3, what will you be doing?
Okay.
Even though you have one more pick for this season. And
Oh, I have one more pick for this
yes,
season too.
sir. Yes,
Oh,
sir. You have
fire,
a
fire.
yeah. I won't announce it here, but you have one more pick that we chose last year. That we
Oh,
talked about.
okay. Oh,
Yeah.
oh, oh.
Very interesting, and I think we're gonna have a really interesting conversation about Orientalism in that film. Yeah,
I'm
but
excited.
but
I'm
yeah,
excited.
but
I'm excited.
what will you be
Uh,
gracing us in season 3 of the Cinema Condition with?
so initially, I was thinking of going with something simple, modern, new, and something that is, I feel like in the process of me being on this podcast, I haven't showcased my passion for, which is stunt work and proper action films and like how to put together choreography of a scene. We talk about shots, but when you talk about choreography within mise en scène, it is fascinating to me. At first, I was thinking the first John Wick, because I feel like the first John Wick came out in this period where we had a generational transition between millennials and Zoomers on who got to go to the movie theaters.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe I'll be more indulgent, and maybe we talk about the raid,
Oh
uh,
fuck yeah,
the first
fuck
raid,
yeah,
which is the inspiration for John Wick.
yeah,
And I think that a lot of people who've gone back to watch the raid, it's been a lot easier to find the raid 2, which
mm-hmm.
is what a lot of the viral clips on YouTube are from. But a lot of people forget the raid 1,
Oh
which is
yeah,
actually quite similar to the 2012 Dread movie, where they
yes,
got locked in the building.
yep,
And so I would think it would be a really fascinating conversation, still in the realm of international cinema, which is something that I love. And this is one of the few spaces where I get to
yeah,
talk about it. And it is so massively influential. It
yeah,
influenced things from even the later Matrix movies, John Wick, Atomic Blonde, The Equalizer, Jason Bourne. Many of
mm-hmm.
our action movies are inspired by, I believe it's a Thai movie. It's from
Yeah,
Thailand.
Thailand, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, I'm sorry,
from
no, Indonesia. I'm sorry, it's Indonesia.
the Indonesia movie, which is even better. Who
Yeah,
thinks of Indonesia as a cinema
yeah,
making place? And they are, and they're influential, and
yeah,
they like. I mean, Transporter was trying to capture things in the raid that it couldn't because Transporter was stuck in American filmography.
yeah,
But Yeah, I mean, I think that the raid would be a phenomenal thing for us to explore and kind of just this. Maybe we could veer into kind of like the general Southeast Asian and Asian action film genre
Yeah.
a little bit. But yeah, I think that's my pick.
Yeah, well, and I'm gonna have to do this to you too because it happens to everybody else when they do that. Because you selected the raid, you are automatically going to get your second pick is going to be the raid two. So,
Oh, okay.
yeah, so it will be
Fire.
raid one, raid two next season, y'all. So,
Fire.
um, that's gonna be great because we did on this podcast we did an episode on somebody did an episode on Police Story.
Police Story is fantastic. Did
Yeah.
y'all talk about Police Story 3?
No, no, no. With that one, he wanted to do Police Story one, but we're definitely gonna do the other ones.
Okay.
I didn't.
Police Story 3 is Michelle Yeoh's debut,
Yeah.
and it is a fantastic film.
Yeah. Well, AK, we thank you so much for coming on. You want to
Appreciate
let the people know where they can find you to keep up with all the things you do and all that stuff.
Oh, sure. I mean, currently I've been only working on one project, which is my full-time job. So if you live in a city, I don't know where people, but if you live in Houston, Pittsburgh, Portland, Las Vegas, Madison, Wisconsin, DC, Denver. God, I'm forgetting the rest of the city, but you can just go on citycast.fm and you can find all the cities we're in. If we're in a city you're in, it is a local podcast that tells it's a daily local podcast that's about 15 to 20 minutes long every day. You can listen to it in the morning. It will tell you about the most important news in your city, new places to go, events to attend. It'll make you a more involved, informed citizen of your own city and the places you love. And if you live in Houston, CityCast Houston is phenomenal. The team there is incredible, is diverse, is beautiful, and they do some really, really great stuff. It's great journalism from a very small team. So all your support would be much, much, much appreciated. So yeah, check out citycast.fm for the website to see if we're in your city, or go to any of your podcasting apps and look up CityCast or CityCast Houston to find out the shows we work on.
Yes, please go do that, y'all. And
and follow us on the socials. CityCast. Just find CityCast on the socials.
Yeah, please go do that, y'all. And of course, you can connect with me on all things social media by finding me at Twitter, Instagram, Letterboxd, Serialized, Twitch, and on TikTok under the Nerdy Chicano. You can find me on all those things. You can also check out the work I do with the Nerdcore by checking out thenerdcore.com, Twitter, and Instagram. Twitter's at the Nerdcore _ Instagram is at the Nerdcore. And you can check us out on Twitch and on YouTube under the Nerdcore. We are also, continuing on with this podcast. We're gonna have another episode next, the next one, and I'm not gonna tell you all what's coming next, but just keep up to date. I'll let you know off frame what's the episode after yours.
Okay.
It's gonna be really interesting. I can't wait to have this person on to talk about this movie.
Perfect.
But yeah, I'm really excited for the next one, y'all. And of course, please do subscribe to the channel. If you are watching this on YouTube, it was really important that you subscribe. You click the notification bell. You leave a like on the video. You're go ahead and leave a 5-star review on the podcast platform that you're listening on as well. It would be very much appreciated. If you want to get this episode early, because this episode is being recorded way early and it's going to be released later on, you get this episode early on patreon.com/thenerdchicano for about $5, I think is the limit. Oh no, $3. I'm sorry, $3 a month. You get all the episodes of the Cinema Condition that are getting recorded right now, early before they drop for anybody else, and along with all the other reviews I do for this channel, for this YouTube channel. So go ahead and check that out, y'all. It would mean a lot to me. But of course, as I always remind you all, it is not mandatory, but it is appreciated. So go ahead and check all that stuff out. I'm really excited for next week. But as always, just don't miss AK all that much because he's still got one more. He's still got one more left. And my God, I am excited to do that movie with him. But without further ado, of course, to my wonderful cinephiles and renowned scholars, celebrate the love of cinema today, tomorrow, and every day after. Catch you all next week, guys. Peace out.
Bye.